When you stop caring about what people think about you, you let that go, and you write the story. You write the story, write the vision, make it plain, and you put it out there into the atmosphere. Whatever you subscribe to God, the universe, crystals, whatever it may be, whatever you put out there, it's bound to come back to you 100-fold. So these ladies here are going to teach you how to do that in today's world, on the digital side, on the paper side with the books, on the other paper side with the green. I'm sure that's why y'all here, right? That's why y'all here, right? So I need some more energy. All right, thank you. All right. So give it up, y'all. So give it up for yourselves for being here first. Because it's power in investing in yourself. So it's power invested in me. So it's going to cost you a little bit, unless you know now. It's going to cost you to invest in you. You started already by being here. You started by being here today, but also to go beyond what you want to go and get that story out to the nations, to the world, to do what you were doing, what you're called to do, because we all have a calling, whether it's, in all of this marketplace. There's a calling that we all have to go to and we all have to reach. There's an individual that's waiting on your story. There's a single mom out there who's wondering, how do I do this alone? There's a single dad out there that's figuring out, how do I do this because I'm stuck to raise these kids. There's a you out there trying to find a you. So as they're speaking today, I want you to go back to that place where something happened to you. And I want you to do one thing for me. Write down what would you say to that person. And then I want you to write that story. So give it up for your hosts, your panel today. They're looking good, right? All right. So we're gonna start. You got it?
Yo, I got this.
Do your thug-dism.
Hey everyone, how you doing? My name is Pauleanna Reid, and today we are talking about how to monetize your story. I mean, words are extremely powerful, right? We wouldn't have our favorite books, our TV shows, our movies, buildings, business plans, right? So how you use words could be the difference between living and surviving, right? I'll give you a little bit of my background. I've been a storyteller since I was a kid. I'm widely known for my column on Forbes. I've been a senior reporter for 7 years, and I amplify Black voices. That is my mission and vision, and that is, everything for me. But I've also been telling stories on stage around the world since 2012, and I've also been a celebrity ghostwriter for, I would say equally so, the last 7 years as well. I own a ghostwriting agency where I pen books, speeches, and op-eds for celebrities, athletes, politicians, executives, and founders. My sister's here with me, Jasmine and Sierra. We've been friends for a very long time, so you guys are gonna be a fly on the wall. I'm gonna ask each of you to briefly share who you are, what you do, what's your superpower, and then we'll get started.
All right, sounds good. What's up, Black Equity Con? What's up? Listen, y'all look good. I'm so excited just to be able to share this space with you guys. I know that the world is taking a weird transition, but it's always so good just to be in the place, to see your beautiful faces. My name is Sierra Rainge Jones. I'm the proud CEO of Live Limitless Media Group. My company is a full-service book and brand incubator.
Hold up. Is someone's phone on? What's that echo that I hear? God damn. You're gonna have to project, baby girl, because we can't hear you.
Okay, because they turned next door. I heard, let's go. All right, let's run this back. So my company is a full-service book and brand incubator. I help CEOs, celebrities, authors, speakers, and coaches to craft signature stories and to release best-selling books. Shout out to some of my bestsellers in the building. What's good? I'm super excited to be here, and so yeah, that's me.
Jazz?
Hey. I'm super excited to be here, y'all. Like, seriously, I'm just a regular, degular, schmegular, honestly. No, but seriously, I'm blessed to be in the building and really blessed to connect with each and every one of you, especially in person. My name is the Jasmine Womack. I'm the CEO of the Impact Group. We are an online coaching and consulting agency that specializes in working with emerging coaches and leaders to help you establish yourself as a credible expert in your industry by writing a best-selling book. And then we help you to turn your book into online courses and coaching programs. So I'm really excited to be here and share with y'all today.
So give her a round of applause. So how did you gain the confidence to share your story? I know when I started sharing my story publicly, my mama would get on my ass because, in the Black community, we're so concerned about our reputation, right? And so it can be crippling for some people, right? Because they're thinking so much about how others perceive them. I know the three of us have been very transparent about a lot of the shit that we've been through, and we've been able to connect and build communities of women and young people. Where does that confidence come from, and what advice do you have for our audience on telling their stories without giving a fuck?
I'll start. I love that question. It took me some time, though, because there is a little bit of resistance when it comes to storytelling, because you don't want to demonize or villainize sometimes the villains in your story. For me, that was my mother, God bless her heart. My mother was an orphan. Her mother was adopted, and so she wasn't the best parent. She wasn't the best mother, and so it created a lot of childhood trauma. And so when I would show up into spaces, I would never want to talk about all the hard things that I had gone through. And then I wrote a book, and that book did so well. It opened doors for speaking opportunities. I got a radio segment. I was getting called all over the world to speak. And then I would show up, and people would say, "Wait, you wrote that book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, who did you expect?" And they would say, "Someone older," because of the wisdom that was in the book. And I realized that sometimes our childhood trauma ages us. Like, I'm like, that's not wisdom, that's trauma. That's trauma wrapped in resilience. And so I had to go back and write another book and become a little bit more authentic and transparent and kind of talk about some of that stuff that I had swept under the rug. But there's a strategy in telling our stories where we don't have to go so much into the detail of all the nasty, hard things that we've gone through, because you don't want your reader to have secondhand trauma. And so I focus on extracting the lesson and extracting the solution and really tapping into the pain point. But if you meet someone at the bottom where you may trigger or tap into their trauma or something they've gone through, you want to bring them into the light. You want to also be able to share a transformational solution. And so for me, it was understanding that my story is what made me. There's no one in the world quite like me. When I think about some of my unique experiences, I can only truly just really thank God for being in the place that I am now, because when I look back, and even when I go back to my community, a lot of people didn't make it out. I would say that my superpower has been having a vision outside of my environment, outside of being exposed to drug addiction and mental illness and extreme poverty. I would still be there. When I go back, a lot of my family members are still there. The only thing that has allowed me to be where I am today is my vision. I had a vision beyond what I was exposed to. I had a vision beyond poverty, beyond brokenness. And I pursued that vision with relentlessness and faith and resilience and perspective. And that's where I am today. And so that confidence comes from being in a space where if you don't show up and if you don't tell your story, who else will? And that's where that power comes from.
Beautiful. Jazz, maybe you can also piggyback on Sierra's answer, but also talk about storytelling techniques, right? Not just only in books, but on stage, in social media, right? Like, what techniques have worked for you in terms of delivery?
That's a great question, and that was a great response to Sierra. So for me, I wrote my first book as an aftermath of the dissolution of my first marriage. So my first marriage lasted all of 10 months. It was a hot mess. And by the time I was changing my last name on all of my documents, we were filing for divorce, and I had a brand new baby. So it was a lot. I was a newlywed, I was a divorcee, and a new mother all in the same year. And while I could have pointed the finger at my ex-husband and talked about, you did this, you did that, I looked at myself. Like, what were the decisions that I made to get myself into this situation or with this person? What type of decisions did I make that got me connected with you in the first place? And so when I wrote my book, I wrote it from a space of wanting to help other young women in their 20s not make a lot of the mistakes that I made that brought a lot of the trauma that I experienced onto myself, because it could have been avoided with more strategic decision making, if that makes sense. So when I was writing my first book, I had to remember not to go so much into the emotions. See, one of the things is that when you are, telling your story, and this may be something you may want to jot down in your notes, you cannot bring people down without bringing them back up. That's in a book, that's on the stage. You don't want to go and verbally vomit on your audience. You're supposed to leave them more wise. You're supposed to leave them with strategies and with solutions. So this means that you must incorporate, and I always say story plus strategy equals success. Telling a little bit of your story or incorporating the main parts, giving strategies to your audience about steps that they can implement in their life, their career, their business, or whatever it is that they're seeking to get an improvement, and that is what's going to give them success. So when you are telling your story, you absolutely have to be solution-oriented. Thinking about what is the purpose of me sharing this particular part of my story? What is it that I want the readers to get from this? And what is the end goal? What is the end goal for my reader? What is the end goal for my client? What is the end goal for the person in the audience listening to me speak? And what is the end goal for myself? How do I want to benefit from this? So I would say that my superpower is definitely transparency. And I have always been one of those people that I just really don't care what you think, because your opinion has nothing to do with the calling that God has placed on my life. Right. And so in order for me to move forward, I have to lean into what I've been called here to do. And one of the things I always share with my clients is that if people have a problem with you sharing your story, then they need to go and share theirs. You have to own it, like your experiences, but you can't make someone else's response your responsibility.
Fantastic. I think another lesson here is you simply don't know who's watching and what power they hold, okay? I was on the phone with an editor at Essence last week, and she reached out to me via DM on Instagram because I had shared my money story in my IG stories, right? Following the framework that Jasmine just mentioned, I not only took people through the fact that at 30 years old, I had $52,000 in debt. I also, in my IG stories, I broke down how I paid off that debt within a few years, how I increased my credit score. And when the editor was looking through my stories, she was like, this is, you just planted something. I think we can build around this. Let's jump on an interview. I've done over 150 media interviews, no publicist, because I share my story on a consistent basis. Thank you. I want to talk about writer's block. I want to talk about we've all been through a lot of shit, right? So where does one start when sharing their story? How do you know what story to start with? How do you know, how do you know when to start? And I'll preface it with this, right? Just because you tell your story once via social media, via book, via stage, I've been sharing parts of my story since 2012. Don't just share it one time with one audience and think that's it. I've shared my story thousands of times in thousands of rooms on thousands of platforms. So I want to encourage you to this is a very, very, very long game. I'll be telling my story until the day I die. However, tell us where to start. When we look at our lifespan, when we look at the things that we've been through, what is the best way?
I would say start with your reader in mind. One of the first things that when I'm working with my clients, one of the first things we do is establish your ideal reader avatar. Who is most likely to love, buy, and recommend your book? And then what are their pain points? What are their challenges? What are their core values? What are their goals? Where are they now? Where do they desire to be? And how can you show up as a solution to drive them to that next level? And so understanding your ideal reader, what type of jargon to use, what type of vernacular to use, where are they already showing up? Who's already serving them? Who's already empowering them? And then how do you carve out a unique space to join that space and be the difference, be that unique advantage? We have so many stories, and so when I keynote, do panels, podcasts, I'm always considering, well, who's in the room and who's listening, and then which one of my stories will resonate the most with this particular audience, and what is the end goal. So you have an arsenal of stories. There was a story about getting here this morning, you know. There's a story about you having a conversation with your barista at Starbucks. Our life is consistent, is full of stories. It's just choosing which one is the most relevant for this situation, which one would my audience resonate with the most, and which one of my stories is gonna drive me to take my reader from point A, or my audience from point A to a desired outcome, because that's what success is, being able to go to a desired outcome. So understanding your reader, your audience, your client, what are their goals, and then how do you show up as that solution?
Yes, girl.
Ooh, so good.
Jazz, I also want you to talk on the benefits of having a book. So packaging your story, right? And how do you choose the book idea?
Okay, awesome. So I would like to add on to what Sierra shared. Like, when you are selecting or determining who your ideal client avatar is that you're writing to, also remember that the person that you're writing to likely is where you were about 4 to 5 years ago. So you might be thinking that what you have to share is not profound, but it is to the person who is currently where you were and where you've made it out of. So when you begin writing, think about where you were 4 to 5 years ago, what you struggled with, what your challenges were, what information you wish you would have had, and you can take that into consideration when you are determining who your ideal client is that you're writing to. Okay, what was the next question?
So so all three of us have written books.
Yes.
How does one decide what's the main story of that book, or what they want to write about?
Absolutely. So when determining the main core story, right? I'm going back to what Sierra shared. Identifying what the end goal of the book is going to do for the reader, and what information you need to share in order to get them from point A, where they are currently struggling, to point B, where you need them to be, and what stories you need to share to help them along that point. So I don't necessarily believe that there's one core story. I believe that life is a story. You can literally turn anything into a story and relate it to drive home your point. So it's not even necessarily about the story as it is more so about the point that you're making and the lesson that you're going to teach, and what story from your story bank or your personal arsenal that you can use to drive your point home.
I want to add to that, because when we think about books, and we had this conversation before we came on stage, I like to call it like the Holy Trinity. It's the book, the brand, and it's the business. And so when I work with my clients, I'm helping them to discover, like, what is that core message? What is that signature message? What are you known for? Like, what is your sauce? When I developed my brand, Live Limitless, I had no idea what a brand was back in 2013. I was just showing up, telling my stories about being resistant, overcoming grief, overcoming adversity. And my main theme was live limitless, go beyond what you see, break generational curses, break the change, do something bigger, bolder, bigger than what you've exposed to. And then Live Limitless started to kind of build itself. Yeah. And so from there, I wrote the book, Live Limitless. And what I talked about is, what are the 10 principles that help someone to live limitless? What's causing you to be stuck right now? And so those stories became the book, and then the book became the brand organically. And then what I struggled with early on is building a business around the book and around the brand, because I was showing up and sharing my stories, and I was building this amazing, highly engaged audience, but I wasn't necessarily monetizing it at first because that wasn't my goal. And so now when I work with my clients, we are thinking about how you're going to market this book, how you're going to monetize it, and we're thinking about monetization during the manuscript development process. Yeah. You don't want to wait until your book is done to start figuring out, okay, who's going to buy it? No. When you start with your ideal reader, you're already considering what they need from you, how you're going to show up as a solution, and what is going to make them buy. Your book is like the low-hanging fruit. You're not going to make $1 million selling your book, but when you establish the book, the brand, and the business, now you can create a revenue wheel for your book, and it's the bundle. What else are you selling? The courses. Do you have a podcast? And so you're able to repurpose that content.
Okay. Before
That's
we
a
get
great
into the
segue.
marketing piece, I also want to address the people in the room who are also public speakers.
Yeah.
So on average, I charge about $10,000 for a keynote. But I remember when I started with charging $50, right? And so when you are speaking on stage, you also, okay, and I'll give you guys, I'm someone you need to know because I actually, thank you. But listen to me. Like, I actually have a hand in who speaks at BYOB, at Black Equity Con every year. This is our 3rd year, if you didn't know, right? And so, like, you want to know me. But what I've noticed when people submit their media kits and when people apply to speak, some individuals are very generic with what they speak, with what their topic area is, and so it makes it very difficult to select you. If you have a particular expertise, right, you want to make sure that you hone in on that when you are carving out your signature keynotes. You also want to have the basic fundamentals, right? Where can we book you? Where can we look for more information? Do you have a website? Is there an application form? Like, do you have a media kit, a bio, a headshot? You don't want to wait to get these things together when you get hired. If I'm going to charge $10,000 for a keynote, you better believe I got my shit in order, right? Like, I'm going to deliver experience. So when someone hires you for an event, they're hiring you because you can move the audience. They're hiring you because you can fill seats. They're hiring you because you can solve a problem. They're hiring you because you can make their company better. You can increase the bottom line, right? So it's not just about telling your story. It's about solving a problem that's going to have a lasting effect on the audience you're speaking to, right? And
Absolutely.
thank you. And also remember, like, there are levels to this. If people aren't hiring you, before anyone knew my name, I was literally putting up my own money. I would buy a room like this, or I rent a room like this. And I was, back in the day when you can put flyers on Facebook and the ROI was huge, I was literally speaking on the street corners. I was speaking in classrooms. I called my high school. Like, make shit happen for yourself, because if you don't get hired now, then people who are in positions to hire you, they will see you. They'll see you working. They'll see you in motion. So don't get it twisted, right? 'Cause when it's your time, God will bring you to the front of the line, but He got to catch you working.
I love the fact that you mentioned that and creating that sense of omnipresence, you know, like doing what you have to do to get your name out there.
Yes.
I find that so many people want to get paid up front, but you have to put in the work. You have to, there's something called sweat equity that people tend to forget exists, right? So I've been friends with Pauleanna for years. I remember when she was going to the colleges for free, going to the high schools for free every single week, and not just going, but documenting, taking pictures, sharing what she was talking about. Everything that you do, you're telling stories. So even while you are here, you should be documenting
On
yourself
your IG
while
stories,
you're here.
your social media, all that shit.
Your captions, like all of it is storytelling, and your experience carries over to your books. Your experience carries over to your stages. And I think I see one of my faves, she doesn't know I follow her, but she takes her camera everywhere and she documents herself.
Yeah.
And she creates her own videos, and they're totally dope. You have to you have to use what you have and make it work.
And the other thing is,
They
too,
pay you so much money on the back end.
if you want people to hire you to speak, and I look at your social media, I look at your YouTube, and I don't see you speak, I don't know your delivery, I don't know if you can move an audience, I don't know, like, people need to see, like, I want to be able to look at your track record over time. I think that's really important.
So I think visibility is key, but another thing that I want you guys to underestimate is the power of other people telling your story. We had this conversation earlier. I'm going to do better, but I haven't had to spend so much money in marketing because of word of mouth referrals. So many people going on and speaking on my behalf. You know, people telling my story for me. People connect with me and say, I heard so much about you from such and such, from all over the world, Nigeria. I'm like, hi, little old me from Pine Hills, 438 Sierra, like, what? But don't underestimate the power of building organic relationships. Yeah. And in order to sustain really effective relationships, I would say show up all the time with excellence and integrity. You're not always going to get it right. You're not always going to get it right. We are human, but own your mistakes and work to find resolve. And don't treat people, clients, like they're disposable. people are not as disposable as we may think they are.
Yeah.
Every year when we get to New Year's, everybody has this cutoff game. My cutoff game is not strong at all because I value people. Now I might reposition you. I might move you. I might move you out the way because I like my top 5 to be my top 5. Like anybody that's that close to me might have, direct access to me. Not only you're not watching me win, you're not hoping I win, you're helping me win. Yeah. I need people on the court with me who are gonna pass the ball, pass the play, pass an opportunity,
right.
Slam dunk, alley-oop, let's win together. Then you also have the people in your life who are watching you. You need your cheerleaders, but not on the field with me. I don't need you cheering on the field, cheer from the bleachers. And then you have the people who can just sit and spectate. What's up from the nosebleed, but just being able to reposition people and position people accordingly. So don't underestimate the power of other people telling your story. Be good to people.
Thank you, Sarah. So I want to talk about marketing your book. So I actually released my first book in 2014 called Everything I Couldn't Tell My Mother. Last week, I still get deposits in my bank account. Last week I got my latest one. That's a long lifespan. I want to talk about marketing your book. I think one thing that helped me tremendously is I started marketing my book before it was even a book. Yeah. So it took me 4 years to write my first book, and I was promoting that shit there wasn't a single person on this earth that didn't know that my book was coming. And when I had my book launch, I had 300 people show up, right? So I think that when we look at rollouts, let's say Will Smith, right? Despite what you think about him, he had a masterful marketing rollout leading up to his book. And then you look at someone like Fat Joe or Lil' Kim, they posted one Instagram post, right? And I don't know how their sales are gonna look. So talk to me about the pregame, right? As you're writing, what are some things you need to put in place to prepare for the presale?
Your pre-sales are absolutely critical to the launch of your book. Mm-hmm. You begin marketing and selling your book before you write a single word. Mm-hmm. Because you begin telling, again, everyone about your book and about the journey of the writing and to expect when it's coming out, right? So before you even get to the launch process, you need to think about who are those key people that you need to help you on your book launch? Who are the key players that you will need to get things from, right? Who are some influencers that can help spread the word? Who's gonna be your street team? Who on your team or who in your circle can help you and support you throughout this process? What marketing and promotion plan are you going to put in place? I always say you should have a pre-launch, a during launch, and a post-launch plan, because many authors, after they write their book, they fall off and it's crickets. So you have to have a plan to keep the momentum going, right? So where are you going to go speak? What podcasts are you going to go on and promote? What media placements are you going to share information about your book, whether it be print advertisements, interviews, so on and so forth? Leading up through the writing process, how are you going to share about your book? What are those strategies going to be? How are you going to set people up so that they can either join a wait list or go ahead and actually pre-order the book so that you already have sales coming in before the book is actually printed, right? To validate your idea. So these are things that you definitely need to make sure that you have in place. Also, when you have pre-sales, what type of gifts or incentives are you going to provide for people who purchase your book before the actual release date? Definitely combine it with some type of events, some type of virtual event where maybe you bring some people in to speak on different topics, or you come and speak on a topic. It can be virtual, it can be in person, but these are some things you definitely want to think about leading up to your book release.
I also think getting your community involved. I think we underestimate the power of community, and that's what really helped me continue to get paid today. Yeah. But one thing I want to say is involve them in the process. So as you're writing your book, as you're writing your speech, when you're practicing your keynote, right? Involve your followers, right? Let them help you select a book cover, or give them a sample chapter to read for feedback, or show behind the scenes of your writing process. You know what I mean? you can't, none of us are Beyonce, like, and people be thinking they're Beyonce, and so you can't just show up. You can't just show up and think that people are going to buy. Like, you have to persuade them to buy. Listen, woo me. Like, what you talking about? Like, it's a process, right? Like, you can't just think people are going to show up with their wallets open if you don't warm them up. If you don't warm them up to the product.
Yeah. And that's another thing. There's a budget. At any type of budget, you can market your book. So I would say it can get kind of overwhelming, but just be considerate. Use what's in your hands. What are your resources? What relationships do you have access to right now? I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she loves, like, underground music. Like, sometimes she's in her room in the morning. I'm like, who the heck is that? But these underground artists have cult-like tribes. Like, my daughter's 14. I'm like, girl, who is Autumn? She's like, Mom, he's so cool, blah, blah, blah. But when I look on his social media and I'm looking at his stories, because now I got to study who she's studying because I want to know who's influencing my daughter because it's crazy out here. But now I'm falling in love with these kids, even if I don't fall in love with their message, because I love just organic marketing. They're just showing up and being who they are, and they're finding their niche audience, their niche tribe. Yep. And the one thing I love about our kids these days, they're not trying to appeal to everybody. They are so unapologetic. They are so who they are, and what they're doing is attracting those people who resonate with who they are. And so for us, and what I'm learning from my daughter, is to peel back the layers and be okay with just being me. Understand you're not gonna be for everybody, and that's okay, but those who you are for, they're going to get you, they're going to show up for you, they're gonna buy from you, and that's what we should be focused on, building a niche audience where you can be the superstar in your own lane. You're not gonna be for everybody, and that's okay, so learn from the youngsters, just be authentic, be transparent, and then show up. It doesn't always have to be so well produced. Like, some of their stuff is just on their iPhone.
Right.
They're not makeup, they're in pajamas, but they're showing up in authenticity, and people really relate to that. You know what I mean?
I like that you said show up anyways, because I think a lot of people would think, like, before they put out their book or a project or speak on a stage, that it has to be so perfect and refined. Can you please talk to us about your writing process? Because a lot of people also struggle with committing to the long game. Right? So my first book took me 4 years. I was, but no matter how, if it could have took me 100 years, I was still committed to getting it done. And I woke up at 5 a.m. most days, and like my sweet spot was in the morning. What is your writing process? What are some tips or advice you have for the audience on getting to the finish line?
It took me 10 years to write my first book because I was stuck trying to write about something that I was still struggling with and had not made it through. So I wasn't operating in integrity. Okay?
Yeah.
Once I finally made it through those challenges in my life, and with a simple shift of my mindset of not just struggling internally, but also because I'm a former educator, language arts teacher, I was literally editing everything as I wrote it. So I couldn't write a sentence, I couldn't write a paragraph without, let me reread this. It needs to be perfect, it needs to sound like this. And because I was taking myself through this mental merry-go-round, I made no progress. But when I cleaned up some things that were going on internally, and I wasn't living in a space of hypocrisy, like how you know what you should be doing, but you're not doing it, but you want to tell other people what to do, right? So once I exited from that space and I was actually living what I was teaching with the simple shift of my mindset, well, you know what? Let me just sit down and write one chapter a day. I'm not going to read over it. I'm not going to try to make it perfect. I know what I'm going to talk about. I know what points I'm going to hit. Let me just write. I worked on one chapter a day and went from struggling for 10 years to actually finishing my first book in 2 weeks, okay? So when you are sitting down for your creative process, I would definitely encourage you to, number one, make sure that you are writing about something that you can teach and talk about in integrity. You can't talk about exiting the traumatic relationship if you still dibble and dabbling in it. You just can't, okay? You can't talk about making money from real estate if you have not done that. You can't talk about making a six-figure business if you haven't made $1,000. But these are things that we hear, and things that people do all the time. Operate in a space of integrity. And number two, definitely make sure you understand and that you know what you're going to talk about in each chapter and what points you're going to make, keeping the end goal and your ideal client in mind. Next, I would encourage you to make a set day on your calendar or in your week, whether it's daily or weekly, to work on your book. Like the word is slipping my mind, but it can't be compromised. It's uncompromised. Like you cannot.
Non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable. Like one of the things that I see a lot of people do is that they try to create something new, but yet they still operate on an old operating system. When you're trying to create something new and you're trying to bring a book forth, you're trying to launch your speaking career, you're building your courses or your coaching programs, you have to make space in your life in order to create it and bring it forth. That means that there are going to be some things that you're going to need to eliminate. Yep. Or else you're going to be in a constant state of, I don't have time, and your book and other goals are going to be optional. But once you enter a space where, it's not an option for me to write my book or speak or grow my business, it's a requirement, then you'll begin shifting things in your life to make it happen.
Yes, girl. Okay, I have one last question that the three of us can answer. I want to know, how has telling your story changed your life? I want to know, how has writing a book or launching your speaking career changed your life? I'll go first. So I recently put my mom on one of my bank accounts so that she doesn't have to worry about shit no more. Like some of my peers, I grew up, I experienced wealth, but I've also been on the other side of it too. Like, when you watch your mama on the calculator on the kitchen table crying at night and shit, like, who wants to go through that, right? So like, as a result of telling my story and investing the time in telling my story over the years, I've given her a little, she can breathe easier now, and she has some freedom.
I would say I love that, because I think that's what it's all about for me, legacy. I would say the biggest shift that I'm most proud of is, I would say writing and speaking has allowed me to disrupt generational poverty. That has been my ultimate goal. If there's one thing I'm on this earth to do, it's do that. And to be completely transparent, I always thought that was like further down the road once I made X amount of dollars. Then I came home one day, and I looked at my children. I drove into my gated community, and I walked into my home, and my daughters are running around laughing and playing. I live in a beautiful neighborhood, which is very, very different from the Section 8 housing that I grew up in. And I had to sit with myself and say, you know what? My ultimate goal has been to disrupt generational poverty. Then I look at my children, and I realize I've done that. I did it. I did it. Like, I am raising beautiful, healthy daughters who won't have to recover from their childhood as adults. And they're going to be set up so much further down the road. They won't have to spend time recovering from a childhood. They get to just thrive. And for me, that has been the most profound thing that sharing my story has given me. I love the access, I love the relationships, but more than anything, it's being able to disrupt a legacy of bondage and brokenness. Yes, I get to do a new thing. I get to be a trailblazer in this new right, and I'm so excited about that, and I feel most grateful about that. So yes, disrupting generational poverty.
For me, writing my book and building my business has allowed me to be the wife and mother that I've always wanted to be. So I was a middle school educator for 12 years. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, language arts, all different learning levels for 12 years. And I was on track to become an academic coach. I was the writing coach at the school I worked at. I was supposed to go into administration, have a specialist degree in educational leadership. So I was working towards becoming an assistant principal and a principal. But writing my book allowed me to take control of my time back. So now I'm able to operate a 7-figure company from home and not miss anything with my kids. And not only that, I'm able to help other people do it too. So I have a client last year. He was able to, because he wrote his book, built his coaching business, he was able to retire his wife, bring his wife home. Now she works for the company. Now not for his company. Now she's at home or whatnot, and help other people create multiple streams of revenue so that they can have options and different opportunities. And you shared something about your mom. You know, my parents were married for 27 years. I'm telling all my business. My parents were married for 27 years and then divorced. And so it left, they went about their separate ways, but it left my mom in a different state. You know, you've been with somebody almost 30 years and then they make a different decision. So with me doing what I'm doing now, I'm able to give money to my mom or create opportunities for her so that she can redefine her life, you know, after 55, and that's a blessing for me. Yeah.
Did you guys enjoy the conversation today? All right, amazing, amazing. We're gonna wrap up. I wanna thank you guys so much, my sisters, my friends. I respect what you do, and I love you. I'm glad that we got to share this experience, and I wanna thank you for attending. I'll be actually hosting the How to Pitch to Media panel, so I'll find you there. And I hope you guys have a great time at Black Equity Con. Have a good afternoon.
Awesome. Oh, follow us.
Go ahead.
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at the Jasmine, Jasmine, Womack, WOMACK. Definitely make sure you follow me there. And I have a free workshop coming up, so more information will be coming to you all about that if you'd like to join me.
Sierra.
All right, so you guys can find me on all things social at Sierra Rainge, and that's SIERRA, Rainge, RAINGE. I'm working on a super dope collaboration. I can't wait to share more with you guys about it. So stay tuned, stay in touch, and I'm super excited to stay connected with all of you guys.
And I am everywhere. You can Google me at Pauleanna Reid, PAULEANNA REID. Thank you guys.
God bless you guys.
Thank you so much.